an unwillingness to accept other people's viewpoints. And in the extreme case, like people are learning programming for the first time. A lot of the ones that I think I'm very pessimistic about are the ones who insist something is wrong with their computer. Like they write a program and they're like, it doesn't work. And they're like, something's wrong with the computer. Like there's a bug in this thing. I wrote the code perfectly and it's not. And clearly like that's not true. Right. But like the people who really struggle, they just are unwilling to accept the fact that they might be wrong. And more than that, like they get upset when things go wrong. The ones that really succeed, I find, are the ones when something goes wrong. They're almost like, that's interesting. Like, let me figure out what the problem is here. Like, it's a curiosity, and there's almost like a happiness when something is there to fix. Like, because they feel like, oh, I can improve myself, I can make my code better. Education doesn't reward that curiosity. A lot of educational systems sort of force you to actually not be interested genuinely in the topic at hand.
Yeah.
And you're more interested in how to satisfy the structure surrounding that topic. So how to like game the system and like the classic question you always ask in class is like, is this going to be on the exam? Right, that kind of stuff. So you have to really unlearn that lesson.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the CTO Show by Tech Vibe. Today we have another special guest who's Charles Lee. Charles is the co-founder and CEO of Coder School, now Yoni. And Charles has been in Vietnam for over 9 years. So welcome to the show, Charles.
Thanks, Philip. Great to be here.
So Charles, I know that you're from the US initially and you went to school there and you moved here quite a few years ago. I wanted to start by kind of, illustrating the difference between Vietnam and US, especially in the field of like engineering and software engineering.
Yeah, that's one of the first questions everyone asks me.
Yeah.
And the first answer I have to it is, I obviously like it here a lot. That's why I've been here for so long. I think you like it here too. That's why you're still here. So I think there's so much good stuff happening in Vietnam. I think there's so much energy, so much passion for things. But one thing I think about a lot when I think about what's different is first there's just like sort of a maturity difference. Like, the companies in San Francisco have been around for longer. They invented the internet. They invented computers, all these things. There's a little bit of like a head start. But more than that, I think that engineers in particular are more well-rounded. So they understand maybe more aspects of the sort of user experience, product, to the business. But also they're just like more ambitious. So there's just a kind of a default optimism, like a belief that you can do it, that you can build the next big thing, that you can be the next Facebook, this kind of stuff.
Very interesting. How does that ambition or how does this like mindset or optimism like manifest? Like, have you seen any specific examples or?
Yeah, I mean, I think so the specific example I think about a lot is, for my university, two people from my university, much younger than me, started this company called Sendit, which is a pretty big payments processor here in Southeast Asia. They're Indonesia/Philippines mostly. But the CTO was a computer science grad like myself, and this was his first job out of university. And so I met him like a few years ago, and I was like, hey, like, how did you become the CTO of a payments startup, which is like a very complicated technical thing, straight out of college? And he was like, I don't know, I just kind of figured it out. And like this guy has built a startup that processes millions and millions of payments every day. If you mess that up, it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
But still, like, at no point was he like, hey, I need to call in someone else, or we need to hire some expensive consultant, or there's no way I could build this. He just kind of figured it out step by step. And I think so often people are scared to try things, or people just assume that they will fail. When really, like, you can take a big problem, break it down, and just kind of attack it step by step.
And do you think that this optimism or mindset is rooted in fundamental cultural differences, or is it education, or where does this derive from?
Yeah, I think it's first, like, you have to sort of see other people do it. So I don't know if have you ever met like a celebrity in real life? Like, who's the most famous person you've met?
You.
Oh, aside from me.
I've met some, I would say, KOLs or celebrities in Vietnam, certainly.
Like, or like athletes, or like, what's like the first thing you think when you meet them? Well, I mean, like you meet them, and then like a few minutes later, you sort of realize like they're normal people, right? So you meet like all these very smart people, and for example, or athletes or movie actors. I saw Arnold Schwarzenegger once, and I was like, wow, the guy's not so tall, right? I'm taller than he is by a long shot. So I think one thing is you sort of meet these extraordinary people who have become legends, and actually, you know what? Like the richer and more successful people are, oftentimes, not everybody, but a lot of times they're more down to earth and they're just kind of normal people. And I think if you meet anyone who's really at the top of their level in anything, the key thing I've always noticed is they make it look easy. Like you watch Federer play tennis, it doesn't look like he's working hard. Just
Right.
hits the ball. Right. And so if you think about all these top performers, they're normal people just kind of doing what they're really good at. It's not some like superhuman, like impossible thing. So I think one is you just kind of realize that these people are human and they're not that different than you or me.
So is it more around having role models or people in your community who look like the heroes or look like the aspirational people that you want to be?
I think that's a huge part of it. I think you meet people from university or people from your company and becoming like, unicorn founders, things like that, or just, very, very successful people. You sort of realize, oh, like if they can do it, maybe I can do it too.
Interesting. I'm curious in the Vietnam context because, when you first started Coder School, you're working with a lot of engineers or people who want to be engineers. And, you've seen them grow from this kind of starting off in their career to now, quite senior across a lot of different industries, a lot of different tech companies in Vietnam. I'm curious about like what are the ones that are successful? Like what is the mindset or what are the traits or attributes that make an engineer successful in Vietnam and what distinguishes these kind of more successful ones?
Yeah, I think there's like there's different parts of it, but if I think of the easiest way to answer your question, it's a little bit more fun maybe. It's like, when do I sort of really start worrying about someone? So of all the people that come into Coder School, if there's someone I'm like, oh, like this person might not make it. What is the thing that makes me like think that? And I think the number one thing is an unwillingness to accept other people's viewpoints. And in the extreme case, like people are learning programming for the first time. A lot of the ones that I think I'm very pessimistic about are the ones who insist something is wrong with their computer. Like they write a program and they're like, it doesn't work, and they're like, something's wrong with the computer. Like there's a bug in this thing. I wrote the code perfectly and it's not. And clearly like that's not true.
Right.
Right. But like the people who really struggle just are unwilling to accept the fact that they might be wrong. And more than that, like they get upset when things go wrong. The ones that really succeed, I find, are the ones when something goes wrong. They're almost like, that's interesting. Like, let me figure out what the problem is here. Like, it's a curiosity, and there's almost like a happiness when something is there to fix. Like, because they feel like, oh, I can improve myself, I can make my code better, this kind of thing. As opposed to people who are like, no, I can't be the one that's wrong.
Interesting. So it's almost like having this humility about your work and what you can accomplish.
Yeah, and then the flip side of this is there's a humility, but there's also like a confidence that you can fix it. There's also another class of people who are like, oh yeah, of course my code is wrong. That's because I'm stupid, or that's because I can never do anything. And that's also kind of self-defeating and not productive.
Interesting. And I guess if you go through the ranks of getting more and more senior through an organization, as you become from an individual contributor to a team manager to even like a CTO, do you find that these attributes are also relatively similar across the board, or are there other things that change?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, for example, a very common scenario that many aspiring CTOs will find themselves in the position of is moving from a technical contributor to a people managing role.
Yeah.
And there's kind of two ways to approach it. One is, hey, everyone hates me, I don't know why. They must be the problem. The same way like you can blame the computer, you can also blame your like coworkers or your management or something like that, as opposed to having curiosity and wondering, okay, how can I fix this problem? This is an interesting problem to solve. To me, like I think a lot of engineers kind of by nature think in a sort of logical problem-solving way. And not that people are exactly the same as computers, but I think there's enough overlap where if you have the same mindset, like, okay, all my employees are quitting. They must be crazy. That's like the computer's broken attitude. Or the, like, how can I debug this? What can I do? Like, what's going on here? And if you apply that curiosity to people the same way you do with computer programs, I think you can get a pretty long way.
Interesting. Do you think that this is like a more kind of soft skill, like people skills or leadership or those kind of things, or?
Yeah, and again, I'm like sort of talking from engineers' viewpoint, but I think the distinction between soft skills and hard skills is like too over-exaggerated. At the end of the day, like either sort of everything is kind of the same skill, which is again humility, problem solving, self-reflection, like iteration, like these things. And it's all the core same personality.
Interesting. I think, from my own observations as well, in the US versus in Asia, we have quite a different mindset in regards to your ability to work as within a team versus as an individual contributor. So maybe in US it's more around that you guys are gonna, you're not afraid to ask for help, right? Or you're not afraid to go to your manager or go to your colleagues. And whereas in Asia, there's a concept of like saving face.
Yeah.
So you really have to stand out. You really have to be the number one. Like you can't show any weakness, right? Do you also find that to be quite common in terms of that mindset difference, or?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard stories, and it sort of happened to me too, to be honest. Like where instead of like you ask someone for a status update and how their project is going,
right,
they'll tell you it's great. Everything's no problems. And then like before it's due, like that person just quits. Like they'd rather quit their job than like own up to the fact that they failed to deliver their project. Things like that.
Wow.
So I've heard of stories like that happening. I think it's sort of happened to me too. Yeah, absolutely.
So how do you coach people through adapting that mindset, especially as you're managing a team in Vietnam, and maybe this kind of attitude is more ingrained from a kind of cultural bias and perspective?
Yeah, I think I mean, I'm hesitating because the other thing that you have to realize too is like you can't solve every problem. I think one mistake I've made a lot in my career is thinking that you're curious about the problem and you think you can solve it. And like every problem, like what's the saying? Like you can have anything you want, but not everything you want. And a lot of these problems are just like, look, that person may not just be the right fit for this situation. So I think you have to sort of be very prudent. And if someone's showing very strong signs of this, it's going to be very, very expensive in terms of time and effort to sort of remold them in a different way. But if you were to do it, I think it's one, like leading by example and showing safety. Like I think that word is a little bit overused, but hey, like nothing bad will happen to you if you admit like that you're behind on the project.
Okay, so it's almost like building this culture where people are not afraid to raise up issues, and you're almost rewarded for transparency and openness. Right?
Yeah, but then like I think that with all things like, I mean, like Kierkegaard says, you can only understand life backwards, but you must live life forwards. Like sort of, I had that view too. Like, I mean, there's a famous Google study about how psychological safety is the number one predictor of workplace success. At the same time, like, I'm a little older than you, so I think I'll say this more. Like, I'm kind of a boomer, and like the Gen Zs, I think, are on the other side of the spectrum a lot of times, where maybe they're a little bit like that's not their key problem is not feeling not safe enough or not asking for too much help or not asking for help. It's like, there's some level of self-sufficiency and resilience you also need to cultivate.
Do you find that true to be in Vietnam as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's very like boomerish to kind of paint a whole generation with one brush or these kind of things, and so I try not to do those things, but you can see those tendencies. So everyone's a little bit different.
I'm curious, like, as you built your company, how have you tried to establish that safety or psychological safety within the culture? Like, are there certain principles or rituals or kind of things that you do that make it less like hierarchical and less bureaucratic per se?
Yeah, I think a lot of people talk a lot about culture. At the end of the day, the saying that I think about most is culture is what you do. It's not necessarily what you write in the documents and stuff like that, although you want to be explicit about it, it's what you do. And that's what people see. And I think the biggest sort of way that you communicate culture is who you reward and who you sort of like punish, to use, a very strong term. And so, yeah, if someone exhibits the behavior like someone like doesn't communicate and like fails their project and like isn't somehow like held accountable, then that's a culture. It's like, it's okay to do that. Or if like, if someone asks for help all the time and that's how they get out of doing things, that's also what the culture becomes. So specifically what I try to do is strike the balance between, yes, mistakes are tolerated, happens all the time, but what we can't tolerate is if you make the same mistake multiple times.
Interesting.
And say, hey, like you did this last time, what happened there? That's number one. Number two is I think you should also be able to speak about them openly and not be defensive about them. Hey, if I say, hey, these results are under where we are, and that makes you upset, and you don't want to talk about it, that's not okay. We can talk about it. I'm not trying to like press down on your painful point to hurt you, but we just need to understand what's going on.
That's great. That's great. I'm curious, like, when you first moved here, which is 9 years ago, you were obviously an expat, right?
Yes.
And then you came to Vietnam, you probably didn't know too many people, and then you started building this company. And while others may not be in the exact same situation as you, moving to another country to build a company, there might be similarities, right? Whether you join another company as, an IC, but you don't really know anyone there, or you join a new industry or new field, but you're not so, familiar with kind of that industry itself. Like, I'm just curious, based on your learnings and own self-reflections, how have you kind of navigated that leap of faith, that journey, and kind of been able to achieve success regardless of these factors?
Yeah, I would love to say I've achieved success. I mean, jury is still out on that. I think the biggest thing is just realizing nothing happens like in a vacuum. So it's always about the people you meet. I think there's a very strong temptation to think, hey, like I did everything by myself. But in real life, like nothing gets done by one person. Like if you could look back and think about all the things that happened, it's all like sort of these happy coincidences. And it's always like other people. And even like in terms of, if you talk about entrepreneurship and startup, the holy grail that everyone's searching for is product market fit.
Yeah.
And like, yes, you control the product, but what influence do you have over the market? You have none, right? So it's just, you have to like find the right market, and that's sort of like, you're just like a little shrimp in the ocean, and the ocean is moving. And it's very tempting to think that you like can control where you're swimming, but it's really about finding the right current and using that.
Got it. How would you recommend someone find the quote unquote right people?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, like what is that current? It's like the people that you're around. So you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Who do you spend the most time with these days?
Friends, work, colleagues.
What do you guys do?
Pickleball.
Yeah, see, like that's the thing. So you find people that have like similar interests, right? Do things that you want to do.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part. But I think a big part of that is actually cultivating interests. Right? Like no one wants, if you're just kind of the average of everything, it's really hard to be exceptional, I would say. If you look at most very like successful people, they're actually all kind of weird, I think. Most of them are sort of like really passionate about certain things or have like kind of weird edges.
Yeah.
You see Elon just hit first place. Did you see the news about Elon in Diablo?
Yeah.
He
It's a
hit
video
number
game.
1 in the world at Diablo. Like,
Wow.
What a weirdo.
Right.
Like,
Right.
But it's like these things. I think it's these types of things that attract people, and you sort of find people at the outliers, and that's where the really interesting things happen.
That's interesting. It's very interesting that you say that because, when you think about the education system, especially when you're young, it almost teaches you that you should not stand out in one area, and it measures you against, these test scores, these grades that are, trying to shape you into becoming a more round person, right?
Yes.
As opposed to being a very unique area kind of thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's like sort of a bad approach, to be honest. I think at the end of the day, like education should fit you, not you fit the education.
Right.
But I can see some merit. I think you need some foundation to build upon. Education system should do that to some extent. Like you can't just sing but not know how to read, like these things. But at some point you have to start developing your own thing on top of the foundation that education gives you.
Got it. So I guess speaking of education, I would love to hear a little bit more about what you guys are building at Uni, actually, and then see how that actually relates to this theme of developing your own unique kind of aspect of your education as well.
Yeah. So one thing I found really interesting is, so I like whenever I moved to Vietnam 9 years ago, and how Coder School got started is I opened a class on iPhone programming. Because at the time 9 years ago, there was this worldwide phenomenon called Flappy Bird. Do you remember this?
Yes.
This little bird that like would pop. And so that was made by a Vietnamese like solo developer in Hanoi. And so this guy was like, he had like 1 billion people playing this game.
Wow.
Right? And so at the time, of course, people were like, oh, well, like, what is this? Like,
Yeah.
you can make money with programming? Like, that was like really coming into the sort of zeitgeist. And so people would ask me, like, do you know how to do that? I'm like, yes, I'm an iPhone programmer. I mean, I don't know how to make $1 billion, but I can sort of build this app very, very simply. And so, like, that's how Coder School started, is iPhone programming classes.
Yeah.
Now, I'm glad we're doing this interview in English, because even 9 years in, my Vietnamese is not great. Actually, my English has gotten a lot better. Do you find yourself like speaking more slowly and clearly than you used to?
perhaps.
Yeah, I know. I can still work on it. I think the people I work with still complain and talk too fast and too soft, but it's like night and day compared to when I live in the States. Yeah, I would just like mumble all the time. But as a result, like this mumbling foreigner would go up there and teach like iPhone programming. It was in English. I think it was kind of awful to take my classes. It was really hard to understand what I was doing, and at the same time, I think those classes were really successful. Right? Like I stand by like some of those early classes were some of the best stuff I've ever done in my life. And what struck me is like, wow, because I'm here, because I'm sort of taking the time to get to know people, I'm able to deliver like a really quality, impactful educational experience. Mm-hmm. And look, am I the best iPhone programmer in the world? Like, I'm barely top 10. I'm just kidding. I'm not. And so, but the fact that I'm here for them and I understand you and work with you, I can have a huge impact. So I think of who the best teachers in life are, in my life or in people's lives.
Right.
It's not usually like the most famous person. Right? Like, you can learn AI from like Andrew Ng on Coursera, who like invented lots of this stuff, I guess. But is he gonna have as much impact, or is, like in my case, I had very famous people at my university teaching. I learned the most from my college roommate. I was really lucky that I had this roommate who is like really smart. Yeah. And after class, I'd be like, "What just happened?" He'd be like, "Well, let me show you." Right. So these kinds of things, these relationships, these sort of personalized connections mean a lot. And I think in the context of what we were talking about earlier with role models, things like that just doesn't exist on the internet. Like there's so many people I want to learn from that look like me, that like would have a way bigger impact on me, but I can't sort of reach them. I don't even know who they are. They're not discoverable. So to give you a concrete example, one of our top instructors on our platform is this guy named Min. His YouTube name is Min Hodler. You should find his channel. And he got his start on YouTube because he taught himself computer science. He was born in Vietnam, raised in Vietnam. After college, he went online and started teaching himself more computer science stuff and kind of discovered all this stuff that he felt like he didn't learn in university. So he made his computer science fundamentals much stronger and eventually got a job interning at AWS, Amazon Web Services in the US. Mm-hmm. And as you can imagine, that's like a game changer in terms of your career. Now he lives in the US and he makes videos about that. But like this guy's journey is so inspirational and it reaches so many people, and like people are affected by that in a way that you can't get affected by any textbook or any old foreigner, right? Because I'm hopefully inspirational to some degree, but there's people even better than me, right, teaching. And so people like that is what we're trying to expose is the wrong word, trying to connect people with at uni. So you can learn from people who like genuinely inspire you and have an authentic story that really gets you going.
Wow. I'm curious, like, are you going to start with certain types of courses or certain profiles of people who have kind of developed themselves, or will you expand it to all types of education across the board?
Yeah. So the mission for now is just help people learn useful things. We want to focus things on useful, not to be judgmental about what's useful and what's useless, but that's why right now focus on technical skills. It's easy to tell how useful they are. So if you learn data science, everyone out there, if you learn how to use a little Python, a little SQL, I guarantee your career is going to get better no matter what you do. Right? You could be making banh mi's in a shop, and I guarantee you could analyze like how many more sandwiches you should be making. So we try to focus on those technical skills, but there's so much out there, and that's why I'm so excited about this space. Is everything, actually one sort of aside is one thing I found very different between sort of Vietnam and the US is like career skills awareness. So how to interview well for a job. So when someone asks you, what are your strengths and weaknesses? That's something that in the US you like have ready to go. Like you practice that from like middle school. Yeah. And I found that a lot of people didn't have that here. And so even skills like that, but there's just a plethora of skills like that you can learn and can really change your career and your life.
Wow, that's great. That's great. It's very interesting to me that you guys are taking this approach because you're almost putting the humanity back in education, whereas a lot of these, AI kind of education things are doing the opposite approach, right? Where some AI model is teaching you, but maybe you don't have as much of a personal affiliation or connection with whoever is teaching you, right? Because it's a robot, like technically, right?
Yeah, and that's why I found so interesting is, and that's something I still think a lot about is, like, none of what we really sell in terms of education or anyone sells in education is really about information. Like, what information did Harvard Business School give you? It's hard to say. But yet, like, how do they impact you so greatly? It's like the delivery mechanism. It's like, I have this information, and the way in which I give it to you can make night and day difference. It's same with like food. If I just like put all the food in a blender and like made a gray like soup and fed it to you, like you would still technically get it, but the sort of benefit you would get from it, the enjoyment, everything, the value that creates would be totally, can be like, 1,000x difference. And that's how I feel about education as well.
That's super interesting. Yeah, like, if you break down education or especially, school for elementary school or middle school, I do feel like a very small portion of it is actually education, right? And a big portion of it is like compliance training or the fact that you have social pressure and peer pressure to learn, or you have these like structured exams and these schedules by which you have to force yourself to actually develop, right? And perhaps it's like a fault of human kind of, consciousness or lack of attention that, these mechanisms are actually better for someone to actually grow and succeed.
Yeah, I mean, and they serve their role, right? Like, I think that if you go to a top university, you don't have access to, like, information that other people don't have necessarily.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff you get, like the systems. I think more than anything, my university time, what that taught me is that I can do difficult things. Like, they give you, like, an insane amount of homework. They give you an insane amount of things, and you're trying to compete with, like, other very smart people. And that just pushed me in a way I never had been pushed before. And that's what I got from university a lot. I grew up in kind of a small town, and I was like the only Asian kid in my school in the U.S. So I was like the best math performer, right? And then when I got to college, I was like the worst at math. Right? I was like getting like the first time ever I got like a C- or something on my first math test, and it's like, what is this letter on my what? I've never seen this letter before.
Wow.
But that's what pushed me, and I eventually got to like B- level. So.
That's good progress. I'm curious, when you have kids, how would you want to design your own kids' educations?
Wow, that's a good question. Like, I did get recently married, so this is something I have been thinking about. No kids yet, but certainly trying to. I think the biggest one is just really, I mean, this is cliche, but trying to create a sense of curiosity in people. So I think the worst thing you can do is say, hey, that's a dumb question, don't ask that question. So always kind of going with curiosity. If your kid asks you why a million times, it's hard not to get annoyed, I think, but then really trying to thoughtfully answer those questions.
So is this more around letting the kid explore various topics that they're interested in, or?
Yeah, I think academically, yes, letting them try different things, asking questions, asking why is the world this way, why is the world that way. Like one story from my childhood I think about is when I was at home. Yeah. We had the AC, the aircon on, right? And I opened the window, and I got in a lot of trouble for that. Because it makes sense. Like, why would you do that? But like as a kid, I was like, well, I want like everyone outside to be cool too, because like all the animals outside are probably hot. But like, there's a way that's like, hey, that's stupid. It's obviously stupid now, like as an adult. There's a way to explain that to be like, hey, like that's not how it works. Like, let me teach you about law of thermodynamics. I don't know how you do that to a kid, right? But like, trying to explain to, hey, it's like there's hot air outside, the cold air goes away, and we lose money. Like, there's something about that. Like those kinds of things are what I think about.
Do you think that developing that curiosity is still compatible with the way that education works these days?
Yeah, so I think education doesn't reward that curiosity. So that's one of my favorite essays by Paul Graham is called The Lesson to Unlearn. So Paul Graham's this big YC, he's your
founder,
your teacher. And he talks about, the example is, let's say you're really interested in European history. Right, and you take a university European history course, and instead of going to lectures, you like fly to Europe and like visit all the castles and like talk to people and like who are in World War II, like whatever you do, like that. That's what someone who's actually interested in history would do.
Yeah,
like watch movies about it. That's not what would get you an A in the class by any means.
Of course.
Right, and so a lot of educational systems sort of force you to actually not be interested genuinely in the topic at hand.
Yeah.
And you're more interested in how to satisfy the structure surrounding that topic. So how to like game the system. Like the classic question you always ask in class is like, is this going to be on the exam? Right, that kind of stuff. So you have to really unlearn that lesson. And so I think while I would like my future children to understand how that system works, but like they should actually develop a genuine passion for what they want to do. And the reason that's so important is once you become like in the real world, like there's no one telling you like this will be on the exam or this will not be on the exam.
Of course, yeah.
And the more people do that, the more they are lying, I think.
Oh.
So I think that's the number one thing is like people always, and maybe this is one difference, like I see like a strong tendency, especially here, give me my KPIs. Like what do I need to do to get the raise and, get above average, get a promotion, like these things. Yes, you should let people know the general scope of things, but like as you progress in your career, the only way you get higher and higher, every stage it's going to get less and less defined. Right? How does Elon Musk become more successful than he is today?
Right.
Like he has to like literally think about, well, I'm going to go to Mars. Like I have to like leave this planet.
Right.
Right. So as you progress, like that becomes less and less defined. But you have to build the ability to to make up your own rules, to really follow what you want to follow.
I'm curious, like, how much of that is culture? Because especially in East Asian cultures where maybe families derive values from Confucian societies or filial piety, whereby if you do talk about something like pursuing your passion or even being the odd one out, you'll often get hammered back in, right?
Yeah.
Both by the education system, but also by the structure of society, which seems a little bit incompatible with kind of this, developing your own passion, developing your uniqueness thing, right? So I guess how does one reconcile, especially maybe younger people who are starting off their careers here, like what would you recommend they do?
I think there's a quote, I forget who said it, but something like, if you're doing something different alone, you're revolting. If you're doing it with other people, it's creating. So I think when I talked about finding friends and stuff, like a big part is like finding that community. So, hey, like I have this idea. Does anyone else have this idea or these interests? Like the idea of hitting this little wiffle ball on this tennis court in this weird sport called pickleball, it's quite strange if you're the only person doing it. But there's lots of people doing it. And as a result, like community forms and like positive things happen. And you create it like, it's not just a revolution, it's like a movement. Right? And that's like the market fit that you're sort of trying to search for. And I think a lot of it, as you do that, like it helps you sort of become, like find that balance between being too crazy and like too revolutionary and also like being pragmatic and affecting change. So I think a big part of it is like, does anyone else think this way?
Right.
And actually like going out and trying to find those people. And they do exist, right? And like, I think the biggest sort of change in my in my lifetime I see is there's a lot of pro basketball players now that are super nerdy. Like I don't know, you know Wembayama, he's like this the greatest basketball player probably in the future. He's like really to Naruto and I forget this other guy's really to Legos.
Wow.
Like so like I think like one thing I'm really happy that has changed is like people are much more willing to like express like their interests and stuff, whether it's anime, like when I was growing up, if you liked anime, you'd get beat up at school because you're a nerd, that kind of thing. It wasn't that bad, but if you really like kind of expose what you're interested in, I bet you can find people around it, and it becomes not weird anymore.
Wow.
Like you can go to Comic-Con, you can be super into Marvel or Naruto or whatever.
Right. You also would want to teach your kids how to have that embrace of their own uniqueness, right?
Yeah.
To find their own niche or
And find your tribe, right? That's
find your own tribe.
Yeah. And I think that's what we've done here. Like I think honestly, like you and I are a little bit weird. Like what are we doing here, right? And then, but I'm super happy I'm here. I think I found my tribe. I really like the people I work with here, local and foreign, and I think we really connect.
Interesting. I wonder if you have any advice for maybe someone who is an engineer or someone who traditionally maybe they did very well through the school system, by which they passed a lot of these tests and they achieved a lot of these traditional measures of success. But now as they're starting off their career, they're trying to find their tribe. Obviously, okay, find friends, but then what else? Any other pieces of advice to actually get started on that journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just a great place to start. It's like, I mean, just find some friends. What do you guys do? What do you find yourself doing in your spare time? What interests can you cultivate? And for me, a lot of reasons why I do startup stuff is those are my friends. So like one of my best friends ever is a guy I met at a hackathon in San Francisco, right? And if you're not familiar, like a hackathon's where you spend your weekend like coding on some project and doing competition, right? And it's basically work, right? But then it's this for fun thing. And so I found some other people who were like super jazzed about spending the weekend coding, right? And that's how we got connected. We had built this like mobile app over the weekend, and we became lifelong friends. So you find people with the same interests. Mine were always kind of along this entrepreneurial line. I found myself like I like coming with new ideas. One of my other best friends was we met. His name's Chris, and Chris and I had met because he interviewed for a job at the company I was working at, and I was the interviewer, and he ended up not joining the company, which was kind of a smart move because I ended up leaving 6 months later. The company was going through some stuff. But what we connected on, like during the talk, was like, oh, like we really like building stuff, and that's why I'm interviewing this startup. I like startups too, and actually, like we connected and we started building stuff on the weekends as well.
Wow.
And then we ended up like sort of co-founding a company together. Didn't go too well, but but we're still friends to this day. And to this day, he'll still message me being like, hey, I have this idea. What do you think about this?
Wow. Okay, that's great. And I guess if you kind of take that mentality and as you're moving up your career and you're progressing to the higher levels, a lot of people talk about this theme of like building a network and networking. Any thoughts on that? Or
yeah, I think so many people go about the wrong way, right? Yeah. Building a network is not how many business cards can I get at this next meeting.
Right.
How can I get in touch with the most famous people as quickly as possible? How can I get a picture with like whatever and post on my LinkedIn? It's not about that. I think it's really about through other people you discover yourself. So who are the people you generally connect with? And if you go to an event and you meet one person who you're like, wow, I really like this person, or I see a lot of like sort of synergy with this person, it's not really even about that person. It's about what did you discover about yourself? Oh, like it's your reaction to that person. And I think the more people you meet and the more people you build relationships with, the better you get to know yourself.
Well, discovering yourself and using that to be authentic and meeting people that way.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm curious as well for you, now that you're running a company for a few years and you guys took a new strategic direction in terms of building Uni, how has the founder journey been for you?
Yeah, I think there's a lot going through my head, and I think the biggest one is always remembering why you're doing what you're doing. I mean, you've run through companies. There's always like a sort of reactionary thing you can do. Like, oh, we have to solve this one problem. Hey, this one person's complaining. This one customer wants a refund. This KPI is slightly under. They can come to. And then every now and then you have to sort of like take a step back and be like, are we doing what we said we would do? And that's why you hear like these really successful people always talking about mission and vision and these things. They're very abstract concepts, but at the end of the day, you have to remind yourself like, hey, am I living the life I want to live? Am I building the company I want to build? And for me, the biggest thing was, well, one is like, I do education because I really want to have an impact on people's lives. So the reason I like working in the field I'm working in, as a computer scientist, like my big thing about being a programmer is it's such a good job because you can work on so many different types of things. Like every single job in the world is probably computers related at this point. So no matter what industry you're in, like so I've worked in games, worked in automotive, I've worked in e-commerce. Like these are all things I really like personally was interested in, and because I was a programmer, I could work on solving these problems. And to this day, I find those problems interesting. For me, education was always such a big one because I actually think, oh, this is worth, like you can really see the impact you're having. So hey, like I'm going to work till midnight tonight, but I know it's going to help this person, right, or these people. And so when I go back to that's why I'm doing education, like I really want to take a step back, and that's why we're doing Uni. It's like how can you reach more people? Right? It can't just be Charles teaching classes. It can't even be the people that Charles finds to be teachers. Like we've had some great teachers at Coder School, like, and they're actually all better than me. But it's like, how could we get 10 times more, 100 times more, 1,000 times more? And realize to do that, we'd have to sort of switch what we're doing. And I think that's the way. Like people ask how you're going to train the next 10 million people. It's like, well, you got to find the next 1,000, 10,000 teachers.
Wow. Okay. For you, did you always have this kind of audacity of vision of I'm going to change the world and train 10 million teachers? Or was that something that you developed?
I think that in life, my philosophy has always been like what they tell you not to do, which is overpromise, underdeliver.
Uh-huh.
But really, like when you think about your own goals, right? You should set really high goals, and maybe you get to like 1/10 of them. Like you aim for the moon, maybe you hit this or you aim for the stars, maybe you hit the moon.
Yeah.
Type of scenario. But in the end, like that's what keeps me going. Like I want to be someone who's always striving for something that's kind of impossible. And along the way, I think you're going to do a lot of good stuff.
What do you tell a engineer, whether it be someone who's starting off their career or someone who is maybe already has a family, about the trade-off of maybe finding a career or job that maybe is not so interesting or exciting, but pays well or has stability, versus pursuing something that maybe is a little bit more risky, but more audacious, more ambitious, more quote unquote world changing, or more aligned with their passions?
They're just different. I think different people are more ambitious about other things. I think people who put their career first are just less ambitious about their families. Like there's people who are like, I want to have the most incredible relationship possible with my wife and children or husband and children, right? They want to have like the world's best, right? This is like the 8th time I've mentioned his name, but again, like I don't think Elon has that. I don't think he's like that ambitious about his family relationships, which is fine. He's ambitious about other things. So I don't think you can necessarily paint one above the other, but you just find out where your passions lie. I think one thing people are afraid to say that actually a really successful entrepreneur explained to me once, and I was surprised when he said this out loud to a group of people. We were at a training. He was like, when I list my top 3 passions in life, I realized that family was not one of them.
Wow.
And it seems like almost like wrong, right? Like how dare you?
Yeah.
But like it's the truth. Some people are motivated by different things.
Right.
Some people just really like money. That's fine. Like you have to understand what that is. And I don't think people who want money are necessarily like better or worse than other things. It's just you have to be honest with yourself, and you can't have it all. You can't be like, oh, I want to have the most money and have the best, most incredible family and have the most incredible health and have the most incredible whatever, like all this stuff. You discover what drives you. And the people who choose that stability, they're doing that because they're super passionate about providing for the family. And there's nothing wrong with that.
For you, how has that changed over time?
Yeah, and that's a good question. Is like, but I think that also just changed over time.
Yeah.
So if I have like one sort of like old man thing to say, I think when you're younger and before you have that family, that's a good time to be really passionate about taking risks.
Right.
Because you can sort of come back and pay back some of that debt later, your emotional debt. And as you get older, it gets a little bit more expensive. The interest rate on that sort of borrowing from your family gets higher.
Got it. So you would actually encourage young people to take more risks earlier in their career? Because
I think so, yeah. And also, I just think you just learn so much. I think there's the problem with stability, oftentimes, I would say, is it can put you in a situation where you're not learning as much as someone who's a little bit on a more risky path.
I'm curious how that also applies to running a company, because obviously, you've been working on Coder School and now uni for quite a few years. And even as maybe a leader or manager, sometimes it's easy to get comfortable with the existing like workflows and things that you do, or even the people around you, your management team. How do you actually push yourself from that comfort zone to, take more risks, to be more audacious?
Yeah, and I think it's again like, what are you passionate about? And for us, embarking on this new brand, new sort of pivot, uni, it's actually very scary. It's very different. A lot of what we're doing, we have to retool the team, I have to learn new processes. I think it's just reminding yourself, what are you out to do? And for me, the other path we could have taken, let's say, maybe Coder School had grown just really, really big in the current form. Then I had to learn how to manage teams of 30, 50, 100, 1,000. And that's also super scary to me. I can't imagine myself running a 100-person company, let alone a 1,000-person company.
Yeah.
But I think that's the kind of cool thing about entrepreneurship, is that no matter what you do, you're always going to be uncomfortable. It's almost a guaranteed, the discomfort, because either the company gets bigger and you learn new things, or the company doesn't get bigger and you have to still fight for your food at every stage.
How do you discover your passion?
How do I discover my passion? I think one is you have to just say yes to everything.
Yeah.
the advice that people give when you're older is like learn how to say no to things. You know, and I think that's important. Prioritizing. You know, someone asks you to be on a podcast, you think carefully before saying yes and giving up an afternoon. But when you're young, it's or just when you're trying to discover your passions, you're not sure what you want to do. Just say yes to everything. Someone says, "Hey, do you want to like go visit Vietnam?" You say, "Sure." Someone says, "Hey, you want to work on this project?" You say, "Sure." Someone says, "Hey, I'm thinking about opening a bubble tea shop. You want to come check out a place with me?" You say, "Sure." Like, I mean, you don't like invest all your money and give it away, but like I think in terms of your time and sort of brain space, you try to be as open-minded as possible. Kind of reminds me of if you're trying to learn improv comedy.
Yeah.
What's the rule?
Say yes.
Yeah, yes and.
Yes and.
So just do yes and with like career opportunities with people. And the story I think about a lot is, and also it helps with making friends, is the founder of Product Hunt, this guy named Ryan Hoover, if you know him, but like he was just very famous in Silicon Valley because he was the guy who would always help everyone no matter what. So you email the guy, you can barely not know him, say, "Hey, I need help with this thing." You'd be like, "Cool, jump on a call, let me explain stuff to you." He's also very smart and stuff. But I think one of his claims to fame is, I hope I remember this right, 0 to 1, Peter Thiel's book, very famous book.
Yeah.
It was just like Ryan Hoover was like, "Let me compile your notes, the lectures you've given at Stanford, and let me like pull them together and sort of make it easy for people to do." And he just did that just because he wanted to help. He wanted to create stuff. And that ended up becoming that book, and he also, you know, ended up making him friends with Peter Thiel, like all these things. So it's just like that energy, saying yes to things, when you have an idea, going for it. And over time, you sort of refine your algorithms, you understand where your passions are and where you're most effective.
Right.
But I think one big problem is people always sort of assume, like, I'm going to fail at that thing, and so I shouldn't do it, or I'm scared of doing that thing.
Right.
When the cost of failure, especially when you're a little bit younger, is like, what did you lose? You lost like an hour of your day.
Right. Right.
That's 1 hour like I would have probably just spent playing Diablo anyway.
Right. Maybe you'd be like Elon Musk.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because, you know, when people think about failure, traditionally it's more like if you fail, you get kicked out of your farm and then you're screwed, right? But now, even if you fail, you can always get another job, right? You could always reinvent yourself, right? You know, Donald Trump went bankrupt a few times, I heard, right? And he's still the president of the United States, right?
Yeah, he's an inspirational character for sure. No, but like that's the thing too. But also, that those are big failures,
right?
But there's like a million micro failures that happen every single day. Like you smile at a person on the street and that person doesn't smile back. Like you feel kind of bad. You kind of put yourself out there smiling at that person. But what if they will smile back? Like these little things. And I think so many of those things, the cost of failure is actually zero. That person does smile back at you, whatever.
So did you have to kind of build up your tolerance for failure and kind of get that muscle to be stronger over time as well?
Yeah, I think you do it. And that's like the big thing about startups is like you have to sell your product, you have to talk to people, you have to go on podcasts.
Right.
Some of them go poorly. You just get used to it.
Right.
And you realize, you know what, I'm still here.
That's great. There's a quote I really like as well where when you talk about luck, where someone says, you know, you should aim to maximize the surface area of your luck. And I feel like that actually encapsulates the attitude of saying yes to new opportunities, right? Because you kind of never know what will fall on your plate, right? And it's only by this net, right, by which you can maximize that surface area that, you know, maybe these very serendipitous, so, yeah, things will actually happen to you, right? And then, you never know what will happen.
Yeah, and that's like meeting people, getting out there, like, you know, absolutely.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I'm curious, Charles, since you've been in Vietnam for, 9+ years, obviously the technology and engineering ecosystem has changed quite a bit, right? Would love to kind of see your thoughts about how has that evolved and, where do you see the future going as well?
Yeah, I'm super happy to see a lot more great tech companies being formed in Vietnam, and I think that's like the first bedrock of any community. So I talk about you have to be around smart people and like people who you have stuff in common with. Like if you look at Silicon Valley, like, people who all worked at Google or like Facebook, they become friends and they start their own companies together. I don't know how many of these big startups were formed by former like colleagues at these companies, but that's a lot of how communities get formed. I'm super excited seeing a lot of progress there. Kind of old man story time is when I first moved to Vietnam, there was a company here called Atlassian, Jira, like it's super famous. They had a huge office here, but they sort of like, to me, like I'm still very grateful for them because I think they really pulled together some of the best people and taught them more modern technologies, took all these Java people, made them Ruby on Rails people. Anyway, like a lot of good happened there, even though that company ended up sort of leaving. But these types of things happen, and these communities form, and people get to know each other. A lot of what we're trying to do at uni is do that through the power of education. So at Coder School, we have lots of great things happen when people have become classmates. People are obviously, like, if you're in a class with someone, that's such a great place to become friends with them, because obviously, one, you're both the kind of people that want more. You're both ambitious. You're both like, you're paying to be there, right? It's not like school where you're like forced to be there. So you're interested in getting better. You're probably in a place in life where you are thinking about what could be the next big thing.
Yeah.
And you're also interested in the same general topic, right? You're both interested in data science or Python or game development, whatever you're learning. So I think that through education, you can form a lot of community as well. So that's a big part of what we're trying to do at uni.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And hopefully the Vietnam ecosystem can develop even further as you guys develop more and more courses.
Yeah. And aside from like the stuff we do at directly related to education, that's like another thing that I really hope either I personally or perhaps as part of the company or other people can help build is more genuine builder communities. So right now, I think a lot of networking is kind of traditional business networking. Like, let me go to this conference hall, listen to a speech by famous people. That has its place, right? Like, that's super inspiring. I think it's really great when you get to do that. But so much more of it should, in my view, be more like grassroots. You go, you build stuff with people, you talk to other people like your age who have your interests, and you both become great people together.
Yeah.
Not just like passively absorbing keynote speeches, but really contributing back. And one of the things, to make a quick plug for one of the communities I'm trying to build here in Vietnam, is a global community called AI Tinkerers. And what it is a whole bunch of people to get together to talk about AI. Not like a fireside chat from some like business people talking about how it's going to change the world in abstract terms, but like it's for people to show off the products they're working on. Like, hey, look, I built this like stupid little chatbot that like makes funny comments. There was one project, not here, but aside, someone built a ChatGPT powered talking skeleton for Halloween trick or treats. So it would like look at the kid and like talk.
Wow.
Right? Which is like very possible.
Yeah.
It's super simple.
For sure.
Kind of. But like those kinds of projects, right? So people who are actually building things and you can geek out about them. There's so much cool stuff like that. And I was inspired because I went to this meetup in Singapore. It's all over the US. It's originally from Seattle and San Francisco. But when I went to the one in Singapore, there was like university kids, talking about their projects. They had this one kid had built this thing and put on Kickstarter and stuff. It was so inspiring. And I was like, oh, that's the kind of community that I hope we can build more of here in Vietnam.
That's amazing. It almost reminds me of, when Steve Jobs was starting Apple, he used to go to these like hobby kind of meetings, right? Or even, when YC first started, it was a lot of these like really weird kids, right? Building companies in their dorm rooms. So, Paul Graham and Jessica, they brought everyone together, right?
Yes.
And in some spirit, it's kind of what you're trying to do here as well.
Yes.
That's amazing. The last section that we usually do is a rapid fire question, right? So these are just 5 random questions. Feel free to answer whatever is top of your mind, okay? So the first question is, what is your favorite tech tool or app that has made your life easier?
So this is a weird one, but I recently made the switch to Lark. I don't know if you heard of Lark.
From Slack to Lark.
Yeah, it's made by ByteDance, like the TikTok parent company. It's like a replacement for Google and Slack. And I'm not like a super corporate enterprise software guy, but I'm like, wow, this is like surprisingly good. And to me, actually, one perhaps bias I had is I never thought that sort of like non-American software could be the best in terms of user experience, but it's quite good.
What about it makes it better than Google and Slack that you've seen so far?
Well, first of all, I have to say, like, for all the startups listening, it's free. So that's like, it's free for, like, it's much more free than other things.
Right.
So that's a huge part of it. But the second is that it's really taken a chat-first approach to everything. And this is something I find really interesting in the world is that, like, I don't really email people anymore, right? We didn't email each other about this. We didn't like WhatsApp about this.
Sure.
And so I'm not sure what that means for humanity as a whole, that we're so easily interrupted. But anyway, like, that's what people do. So they sort of re-envision like documents and everything around chat first.
Interesting. Oh, check it out. Second question is, if you're not doing what you're doing now, what other professions would you have pursued?
Oh, that's a good one. Sometimes we might have to edit this out. Sometimes I think about what my life would be like if I was working for www.fuckingmachines.com.
And what is that?
I don't exactly know, but I mean, you can tell from the name. So actually, it's a funny story because after university, one of my friends got this. He was a mechanical engineer. He got this job offer, a very generous job offer, from a company that made like I think pornographic videos with like machines.
Right.
But they needed people to like build these like sex machines. And it was like they would pay like triple what everyone else would pay.
Wow.
And on the whole, like I actually probably imagine the technology is pretty interesting. Like to build these machines is pretty interesting.
Right.
It's just like you just would have to have that on your resume for the rest of your life.
Right.
And I don't know. And I think I don't know what company culture at one of those companies is like. I don't know. It might be a little weird.
Okay.
So I chose computer science because I actually couldn't decide between two majors at university. I either want to be an astrophysicist because it sounds super cool.
Wow.
Or I want to be a herpetologist. You know what herpetology is?
No.
No one knows what this is. It's the study of reptiles and amphibians.
Ah, okay.
So the Greek word herp is to crawl. They're not actually like that related, but somehow they got grouped together and study. So it's like traveling the world, like capturing like snakes and lizards and stuff and studying them. I used to have all these like pet lizards and pet snakes and stuff when I was growing up. So
that's fascinating. What are you most grateful for?
Honestly, I'm most grateful for being healthy. So I think that's like something Naval has a quote about. The healthy man wants many things. An unhealthy man only wants one thing. And I think it's so easy to forget, like when you have health and sort of those things, how lucky you are. So, like, it's really sad. Like, there's a very sort of famous VC that just passed away a few days ago, and he's younger than me. And I was like, wow, that's crazy.
Life is short.
Life is short.
What's the worst advice that you've ever received?
Yeah. So my dad's gonna hate me telling this story, but I'll do it. I don't know if he'll watch this. So the story is my second job out of university. I got this job offer, and I was super excited about it. And of course, I like called my dad and told him about it. And he gave me some advice. And his advice was this: you should make a counter offer, but you should lower your salary. You should negotiate that they should lower your salary. And I was like, oh. And to be fair, he's like, maybe you should like ask for a bonus and stuff, but he wanted my base salary to be lower. And I was like, okay. And the HR person was like so surprised. She's like, this has never happened before. And in hindsight, it was terrible advice, right? Because one thing is that, especially in your early jobs, I think it's really important to get a good base salary because basically every time you change jobs, they base your new job based off your old job salary.
Right.
Not always, but like that's a very common thing. So it actually it compounds over time. That's one. But maybe bigger than that, it's just like that was like maybe the sort of old school Asian versus American school of thought.
I see.
And
what was the thinking behind that?
Yeah, it was my father's thinking was like, wow, a job offer is too good. You're gonna get fired right away because you're not. Why would they pay you that much? Right. I think it was like, he's like, you get paid more than me, and I've been working for so long, right?
Wow.
At the time, I mean, it still is a great time to be a computer scientist, programmer. But that was the thought. So it was more about stability long term. He's like, hey, look, if you're one of the highest paid people and it's easier to get fired. When there's layoffs, lay you off first. And this is like sort of true, right? There's probably some truth to it. But in the day, I think it was terrible advice. You should actually always negotiate for more, and just work to excel, and not be afraid of like defense on those things.
And then the last question is, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Yeah, I don't know if I've received like a good piece of life advice. I mean, there's plenty, but it's always sort of it'd take too long to explain. I can tell one tactical story, and it's the exact opposite of the previous story, actually. So during a particular time in Coder School's early days, we were really struggling to fill this class. And we had like a class coming up, and we just hadn't sold enough seats for it. And so what did we naturally do? We're like, okay, fine, we got like discount the class by 50%, like offer all these things, and not even that was working. And so my investor at the time, my seed investor, a guy, Mr. Ting Yan, he flies in from Singapore, like we have this like emergency meeting, and he's like, I have an idea. I'm like, what is it? He's like, you should double your prices.
Mm.
And I was like, what? But you know, we talked about it for a long time, and we're like, look, we don't have lots of options. Let's try it. Yeah, when we doubled our prices, we actually doubled the amount of seats sold.
Wow.
So we like whatever 4x our revenue on that, and it was really like, hey, like when you increase your prices, it sends a signal that you're very confident in your product. And to be honest, like it worked not because we're tricking people, but we really were confident in our product. Like that class was like an excellent class. We knew it was the best class available, and we should have just been more confident charging what we really thought it was worth. And it helped our sales, it helped our marketing, because everything was more authentic, and just let people know what we really believed in, which is like, this is the best possible experience to have. And yeah, that was the best advice I ever got.
That's amazing. Charles, thank you so much for your time today. I feel like we learned so much about not only about your own career, but having a mindset of optimism, knowing your worth, and taking risks, calculated risks, not being afraid to fail. A lot of generalizable life advice, not just, you know, for people starting a business or people going through their careers, but also in your personal life as well.
Yeah, I feel guilty that, I mean, this is a CTO show. I wish I had talked more about CTO specific topics. If there's one piece I could drop, it's like, hey, a good CTO needs to be able to anticipate the future. So as you build stuff, please architect it, thinking about where the software will be 1, 5, 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Aside from that,
Awesome.
How much to add?
Well, thank you so much, guys, for your time. Really appreciate you, Charles, for taking your time to talk with us on a busy afternoon. And we'll see you guys for the next episode.
Thanks. Like your shirt.